Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Jack Revell Show. Today, I'm very, very pleased to bring on my friend, Dr. Johanna Ward. She is here today to talk about longevity, health, and kind of like resilience, really, in our bodies moving forward. I think this is extremely timely considering the situation we are in at the moment in the world. And Joe and I have spoken over the years and have been in touch over the years and have agreed over the years that we need to be a lot more aware of how we're looking after our health long term, not just in the short term. I think everybody is quite keen to jump on fad diets and things that they see in Cosmo magazine and everything else. But I think overall we need to be looking at what we're going to be doing all the time consistently for the rest of our lives to be able to actually see it through. So Johanna, welcome to the show.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. So tell me, what are you working on at the moment? What's going on in your world?
Well, lots of things. Obviously, we're all coping with COVID, and that's kind of fundamentally shift the way we live, work, rest, play, all of those things. I'm currently researching my second book on longevity. My first book was all about superfoods. It's called Superfoods to Super Health. So it was all about kind of diet and lifestyle. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit. But the second book is all about kind of anti-aging and longevity and how we can try and improve our health span and our lifespan. So it's exciting. As I'm researching, we are kind of realizing very profoundly that the ceiling of human existence has just lifted. We don't know how long it's possible for humans to live. And there's a lot of excitement in that. Obviously, in many ways, we are our own worst enemies because a lot of us live quite toxic kind of lifestyles. We have, diet and lifestyle changes that we all really need to address. Diet and lifestyle are some really big things that some of us are doing really quite wrong. And actually, when you bring it all back to the COVID pandemic and what we're all facing collectively and globally, what we know is that you need to be healthy right now and you need to have immune resilience. And the comorbidities for things like COVID are the very same things that are putting us all in a premature grave. These are the things that are killing us in the West: heart disease, diabetes, obesity, dementia, stroke. These are the things, these are the chronic diseases that are often related to poor diet and sedentary lifestyles that are making us currently much more risk of COVID severity. But also these are the things that are cutting short human lives. And these are the things that as doctors we see every single day at play, obesity, and then that cycle. So what we notice in societies is when societies leave their traditional way of eating and living and become more and more industrialized and processed and westernized, there is a pattern that happens over and over again in terms of chronic disease. First, people become overweight, and then we have obesity, then diabetes, then heart disease, stroke, and cancer. And it happens so much that we've actually coined the term Western diseases. These are chronic diseases to do with diet and lifestyle that are, as I said, putting us in a premature grave. So we've really got to bust this 20th century myth that we can eat whatever we want, reverse it with a few blood pressure pills, ignore the fact that we've engineered exercise out of our lives and become incredibly sedentary. So these are the big things that all of us need to work on if we do want to live a long time, but also live with quality years. It's not just enough to live to 80 if at 60 you become demented and you no longer know who you are or who your relatives are. That's not quality. So the second book is researching about how we can live long lives, but fulfilled lives, happy lives, lives full of quality and love and abundance, and lives that we actually want to be living. So it's really exciting.
It sounds really exciting. And so why is this important to you? Why suddenly the interest in that? Your first book was all about superfoods and super health and kind of living, I suppose, right now and what you can do right now to make yourself better. What's then shifted your thinking to the more longevity side of things?
Well, actually, I guess as a parent, you always think, gosh, I have these 3 beautiful children, which I do. And I think, gosh, I've really got to invest in making sure that I'm around. I feel a huge responsibility to my children to make sure that I'm around. So I always say to them, Mommy's going to live to 100. And, I'm always interested in the science around, how do I get there? How do I do that? How do I make sure my family members have good quality lives? I'm a doctor, so how can I help my patients live quality lives and improve their health span and lifespan? Because these are the things that we're teaching people every single day. When people come to us and they have problems with their blood pressure and, problems with their weight and things like that, a lot of people actively want to make change. And when they're ready, it's really exciting, because that's where I can really make some really amazing, results. We can set personal goals for people. And it's amazing, studies have shown that a lot of doctors only spend about 1 minute or less than 1 minute in a consultation talking about the importance of diet, for example. But diet is so important. Every single day, 3 or 4 times a day, your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner, you are making choices about what you put inside your body, which becomes the building blocks of your body. It's your cellular fuel. So you want to be making choices that are premium. You want to be eating premium food so that you're running on premium fuel. So it's really important that doctors learn more about nutrition and educate themselves, because we know a lot about pharmaceutics, right? And drugs and drug interactions. We learned copious amounts about pharmaceutics and pharmacology and drug interactions at university. What we didn't learn very much about, in hindsight, a wasted opportunity, was diet, nutrition, and the profound impact that improving your diet and nutrition can have on your health and lifespan. So actually, it's all linked back to my first book, this desire to understand more about longevity, but also the science is changing. So it's quite amazing. A lot of scientists now believe that we actually, we have never even thought to question, do humans have to age? And we've accepted that aging is just a part of getting old. But actually, there's a new way of looking at things, which actually is saying, well, actually, aging is just another kind of disease process. It's that we didn't realize that it's caused by, inflammation, free radicals, and toxin and carcinogen exposure and things like that. And actually, we have control over it. We can prevent a lot of it, at least. So it's just a really interesting area of science, and it has personal, obviously, I have a personal vested interest in trying to learn how to live a long life. And I guess that's why I got into it.
Fantastic. It sounds a little bit like it's going back to basics. You mentioned at university you learned all about these super complicated pharmaceutical drugs and things that can, cure your life and all the rest of it. But actually, what it sounds like you're saying is that actually we just need to go back to basics of eating the right foods for the right type of person you are, and then that will create the cellular makeup that will create your life in a long term. So what's the problem that people are facing if they know that it's as simple as going to the supermarket and buying the right foods? Why aren't we doing it?
Good question. So I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that we're all incredibly busy. Convenience, long shelf life foods, I call them kind of gas station foods. They were created to help us because we were so time poor. I think so many people are under so much kind of micro stress every single day. I always say that, like, adulting is an extreme sport. You have to go to work for 10 hours a day, come home, feed the kids, try and exercise. That's a 14-hour day. It's a bit like trying to, run a marathon all the time. We're like this. We're constantly juggling, and we are 24/7. We've got overflowing inboxes. We are inundated with data, with information, and with responsibility and chores and jobs. So the problem is a lot of us can't switch off, and we need convenience. And that's where convenience food has come into it, is that none of us did a deal with our lazy selves, and none of us want to tip into any kind of toxic quicksand with our lifestyle and diet. But it happens so slowly, and it's so easy to grab a microwave meal, to go and get a takeout, to go to the supermarket and just buy these kind of long shelf life foods, to not have time to cook from scratch is another thing. So it's kind of like an accidental thing that we've all fallen into. And then if you look at our youth, they think Subway and Starbucks is normal. A lot of young people now don't, I mean, the statistics are dreadful, actually. The World Health Organization looked at British teenagers and they eat less than one portion of fruit or vegetable a day, a lot of them. So the vast majority are going to be very, very low in their micronutrients, because the thing is about these supermarket kind of convenience foods is they're often nutrient depleted. So I always say to my patients, like, right, rule number one, eat more from the soil and less from a box. We've got to start eating real foods, because so much of food has become adulterated and changed, and you only get a long shelf life by adding chemicals, preservatives. Often these foods have super added sugar, super added salt, unhealthy fats. And if you look at those kinds of things, they don't serve us beneficially in any way. In fact, they take away from us. You know, all of these chemicals that we've introduced into our food chain and pesticides and things like that, they're actually really damaging. So it didn't happen by us being lazy. It's just that convenience happens. And when we're all so busy, often spending an hour and a half every evening cooking from scratch is difficult, right?
Absolutely.
There is a movement, there's awareness. People are starting to understand that we've got to eat more plant-centered foods and cut out certain things. But, you know, even with the best intentions, and even when you're incredibly health motivated, it can be hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a big question around the price as well. I think a lot of people have this idea that eating healthy is expensive. And I think that's because in supermarkets, everything that's organic is usually more expensive. Everything that's out of a box, so to speak, is usually more expensive. But it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. I think that's more marketing and the branding of something, you know. I go to the shops all the time and look for sort of a cheaper alternative to the same thing that I want. And it's amazing actually how much, if you look a little bit deeper, you can find the same product that you're looking for just in a cheaper way. So if someone was going to go to the supermarket and wants to sort of eat healthier, what are the kind of rules that you would go by? You mentioned before, no, less box, more soil. What other things that could people use as a sort of a guideline?
Yeah, well, I always say, like, primitive man didn't run through the supermarket grabbing Fruit Loops and, you know, crunching up cornflakes. So what I would do is look at your breakfast, lunch and dinner, your three main meals of the day. Now, a lot of people will start with, for example, cereal. Commercial cereals are about 30 to 40% sugar. Not a great way to start the day. You get a massive sugar hit and then you get a crash. So looking at that one meal, you could say, well, what could I do? So instead of that, I'm going to have a smoothie. So if you have a smoothie, you can take all these amazing fresh ingredients, you can blend them together, add a plant milk, you know, like a oat milk or an almond milk or something. You can get kale, avocado, banana, berries, some cinnamon. You know, you can put lots and lots and lots of micronutrients into one single meal, breakfast, and that floods your cells with antioxidants, polyphenols, all of these vital chemicals that calm inflammation, that are, you know, vitamins and minerals as well, that help your body build resilience. So then we could look at lunch. Well, what could I do for lunch that's really easy? Well, actually, soup's a great one. You can make yourself a bowl of soup. I wouldn't buy commercial because they're full of salt, sadly. So if you make it from scratch, that's the only way that you take back your own power, and you take, you know, you don't delegate the food industry to feed you. So I say, you know, do it yourself. So either a lovely green salad with lots of vegetables, or a soup, and on the soup you can just sprinkle some ground flaxseed, some pumpkin seeds, you know, seeds, some grounded walnuts, you know, all of those things, because these are all superfoods. So the more things that you can get into your meal and switches, the better. And unfortunately, supermarkets are great at selling really long shelf life food that doesn't really degrade over time. But that kind of food, there's a few exceptions, but that kind of food is not particularly beneficial. So sometimes it means going out to the shop maybe twice a week to get your fresh fruit and veg, because they are perishable. And looking for the bargains, looking for things that, you know, you're going to use in the next few days. Dinner, again, I always say to everybody, you know, have a look at your dinner and try and change. And my motto always is, you know, if you don't want to eat something, don't bring it into the house. If you don't want your kids to eat it, don't bring it into the house. That's the first change. Dinner, bed of greens. Every dinner can These are your powerful, anti-inflammatory foods for preventing heart disease. These are very, very good for your brain, for Alzheimer's. We've got a massive problem with dementia in our society now. So just thinking about food as a means of preserving your health and investing in your long term, rather than a quick fix always of just, I'm going to eat this and then I won't be hungry. I try and do that. And I try and teach my patients to make these small little meal swaps. I mean, most of us probably only have about 12, 14 recipes that we rely on all the time, right? Get yourself some really great, healthy recipes that the whole family like, and use them. It is about kind of teaching yourself in a way to cook new meals that are healthier and to shop in a different way, but it is possible. And actually it may buy you 20 years back of your life, and who doesn't want that? That's huge.
It's the consistency, I think, that people forget. I'm hold my hand up and say that I'm one of those people who have done probably every diet under the sun over the years, and they work for a bit. Of course, you see results because your body changes along the way, but they don't last because they just aren't sustainable. Whether it's eating a low calorie diet or eating only 2 times a week or whatever it might be that's going on. So I think when people think about the consistency of what works, I think that's the most important thing. And what you were saying there about how if you just get into the habit of going to the shops twice a week, getting your fresh stuff and making, things like soup and, smoothies, you can make big batches of them and then keep them in the fridge or the freezer. And it's something that you don't have to do every single day. But what are the main food groups or foods that people could be upping right now with COVID that's so rife in our society, and sort of the things that are very easy to bring into the household that people can start adapting?
Sure. So, the main thing is most Westerners are not in macros. So people have this obsession with macros: fat, protein, carbohydrates. Most Westerners aren't deficient in these things, but we are deficient in micronutrients. So there's lots and lots of, if you break food down to its micronutrients, its vitamins, minerals, amino acids, those kinds of things. And lots of Westerners are, because we've kind of crowded our plates with junk food and not enough nutritionally dense food. So I think easy things are, so anything that's vitamin and mineral rich. So plant-based foods are great. I do like to be plant-centered myself. I don't think you have to be exclusive. I don't think you have to be vegan, but I think putting more fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds back onto your plate can definitely crowd out the junk. I think if you are going to eat meat, then you need to make good choices about where that meat comes from, because a lot of commercial meat, sadly, is full of antibiotics. A lot of pharmaceutics can be found in meats that are poorly raised. So I think, organic, pasture-raised, grass-fed meats, animals that are raised cruelty-free, and then think of, if you are going to eat, beef or poultry, that should be the side, maybe not the main. 10 years ago, if you had a steak and chips, you'd have a tiny little salad, a massive steak, a massive proportion of chips. We have to change that. That isn't healthful eating. So the main part should be your green leafy vegetables and your salad. If you're going to have a steak, it needs to be the side part. And the chips, I would say, just get rid of. French fries are just bad. They're inflammatory foods, and swap it for a sweet potato that you can make into a jacket potato that's rich in antioxidants and phytonutrients and things like that. So actually it's knowing what to do. It's having some guidance, and it's keeping it simple, because we are all busy. I don't think we need to overcomplicate it, but plant-centered is always, I think, a really good way to be.
You mentioned at the beginning about the biggest, suppose, killers or diseases that are really affecting the Western world, with obesity and heart disease and that sort of thing. Why does it take for somebody to come in and see someone like yourself, and for you to tell them, hey, if you continue the way you're going, and whatever that be, the lifestyle you're leading, the diet you're eating, or the exercise that you're not doing, that you're not going to live much longer than 10 years? Why does it take having someone like yourself tell them, and they can't actually see that themselves, whether that be in their overall fitness health, what they see in the mirror, and that sort of thing. You know, it surely, is it a denial thing? Is it something that people kind of just don't understand? What is it that you find is the sort of the biggest tipping point for people in that position?
I think it's a very complex mix of many different things. It's not just that people come to the doctor and they have a light bulb moment. Often they don't. I mean, when I see patients, I tell them repeatedly over and over again the same diet and lifestyle advice. Often they just ignore it. Okay, doc. You know, sometimes it gets through, and that's when it's amazing. But I think it's a socioeconomic, it's behavioral, it's societal, it's just the fact that, you know, these actually, it's much harder to be healthy than it is to be unhealthy. You know, those of us that are health motivated have to really stand strong against the temptations of the supermarket aisle that's just got so many ultra processed foods in. You know, the fruit and vegetable aisle is only about 1 or 2 aisles of an enormous 24 aisle supermarket, right? So the whole environment has changed. If you go to hospitals, I used to work in a hospital when I was a junior doctor, there was a Burger King on site. You know, these are fundamental paradoxes that don't work. If we made healthy food more available, I think people would learn that I can make that choice and it's easy. I think so much fast food has been unhealthy, and what we're not realizing is that people do need some help with convenience, but we could make some healthy stores, you know, like Leon is partly trying to do that, where it has lots of green leafy salads available at a fast counter and fresh ingredients. So I think we're partly there. The environment is very difficult. I think the other thing is, like, if we look at obesity is it's something that runs in families because behaviors run in families, and sedentary lifestyles often run in families, and you know, children will model and copy often what their parents do. So actually we need to teach children in school about healthy eating. We need, as parents, to be setting the example and living clean and green and healthy, active lives. So a lot of it has to start with complete re-education of our system. And I think even the medical system, you know, being part of it myself, I can see the places we've gone wrong. You know, we've often found it easier to say, okay, well, I'll give you this statin or this blood pressure medication because at least we know then that the patient might take it. So our patients are much more inclined to take a tablet often than they are to go out and change their whole diet and lifestyle, because it's hard. It's hard. And it takes willpower. And yes, it's probably easier to do nothing and to carry on in your old ways. But actually, if you think about earning back those extra 20 years of your life, that's very empowering. You know, and I often say this to patients, well, let's imagine that we don't get on top of this problem. Let's imagine that your life is cut short by 15, 20 years. What are you going to miss out on? You know, it's your children aren't going to have a parent to be there at the weddings, at the christenings. You are going to miss out on all of your retirement plans if you end up in a premature grave because you've chosen not to do something. And I always say to them, it's hard. I know it's hard. I have to work really hard at my health. I could easily be a size 16 if I let myself, but I don't, because I choose and I make choices every day, and I'm having a constant dialogue with myself saying, no, you want to be healthy, you want to feel great, you want to be vital, you want to live a happy life, and you want those extra 20 years, right? So it's complex.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think it comes down to a need and a want and a motivation, because I've been plant-based now for about a year and a half, and the reason I went plant-based originally was because of fitness reasons. I wanted to see if I could change the way that my body worked when I was training for a marathon, and I hated it to begin with because it was painful. Like, I had stomach aches and I was eating way too much fiber, and I wasn't really understanding how much kind of I had to substitute out for the meat that I was obviously needing to the protein I was replacing. But actually, over time, I found that it's become an easier way of living in a plant-based world, because people think it's like, I get this question all the time: what do you put on your plate? And it's so funny because I'm like, well, if you look at a supermarket, right? And go into any Tesco's and ask yourself, right, how many different types of meat proteins could you find? You could probably list 10, right? Then if you list how many fruits and vegetables could you find, you could list 50 plus. So then you wonder, like, how do people get their head around like not being able to put fruit and veg on a plate versus having meat? And I think you said, as you said yourself, it's a generational thing. It's a society thing. We've been brought up through the years of seeing our parents have meat as the main meal and then everything else surrounding it. And I think that, as you mentioned, it's about creating the environment for people to be able to learn from. So, you know, it's not just doing what your parents did or what your grandparents did. It's doing what you want to do. And, you know, I live in a household where we don't have any meat in the house at all. And I don't even think about it. It's so weird. It's almost so foreign. Whenever I see meat on a table, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that is, you know. And it's just your environment you're in. So your kids, your family are all plant-based and all, you know, all absolutely happy and healthy and able to adapt to it. How do they find that with friends at school and when they go to other people's houses and stuff? Are they quite open to saying, yeah, no, I don't eat this, or I only eat that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm plant-centered. The reason why we needed to remove dairy from our diet is that my son is very, very allergic to cow's milk. So he had very severe eczema as a child. If he had any cow's milk, he would have diarrhea and things like that. So, I mean, that's easy now because there's so many amazing plant-based milks, right? So oats, almonds, soya, you know, there's so many now. So, I mean, it's infinitely easier making these kinds of choices. And for us, it's just a health choice. He can't tolerate it. So we've had to find alternatives. But what it makes you think is, gosh, we've been conditioned and kind of not brainwashed, that's too harsh, but we have been told. I mean, Jack, do you remember at school, I had to drink cow's milk because we all had we had break and it was always cow's milk, and our parents paid for us to have milk because we were told that if we didn't drink milk, we wouldn't have strong bones and we wouldn't grow. And when you look back at that, you think, gosh, that was really, really clever on the part of the dairy industry, because they got into schools, they got onto us young. I don't know if anyone ever asked, like, where's the science that shows that? Why is it that you're telling us that we have to drink milk when we can get calcium from other sources, from green leafy vegetables and things like that? So I think as a society, we've progressed and evolved enormously because we aren't taking those kinds of, you know, I mean, that was just the dairy industry telling us that we needed to have milk. So we don't take that as given now. And there are so many plant-based alternatives, plant-based choices in restaurants. You know, don't forget, 20 years ago, it was much harder to be, well, definitely a vegan, but even a vegetarian. Your vegetarian menu options were really quite restricted. Now it's super easy. I mean, we've just got an abundance of choice, haven't we? Anywhere we go. Even on, you know, airplanes, absolutely everywhere now caters to vegan, vegetarians, kosher, you know, dairy-free, gluten-free. You know, we have a lot of choice now. So now it's easy. And now, I mean, for me, my children, they don't really know what they're missing out on, to be honest. They sometimes come home and they say, oh, you know, I might switch from being a vegetarian now, mommy. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, let's talk about that. But then when we talk about the animals, my children are always like, oh, I'm not sure I could eat the animals, actually. So, you know, I haven't ever forced them to, you know, follow my thinking. I'm just leading by example. I wouldn't have an issue if they said to me, oh, mummy, could I have this meal that's, you know, that's maybe got chicken in and things like that. I just choose for myself. I don't need it anymore. I've made those choices based on environmental health and kind of wanting to be compassionate to animals. But it's not, you know, it's not, you know, I don't think it's compulsory for my kids. I want them to feel and find their own way in it. We just have very little as a household in terms of any kind of dairy because of my son, but meat, I mean, my husband doesn't really eat meat anymore. Having said that, if you're going to be vegetarian or vegan, you do need to be a little bit aware of some micronutrients that you need to supplement. So I do always say this, you know, things like omega-3, very important for brain health, particularly given that we've got huge issues with dementia. So often vegetarians and vegans miss out on omega-3 because the vegetarian sources aren't quite as active and bioavailable in your body. So I do supplement omega-3. You can get that in algal oil. because that's what the fish eat in the first place. So the fish are the kind of middlemen in the whole omega-3. Omega-3 is very important. It's a powerful anti-inflammatory. So I do think you need to be aware of that. B12, very important. It's almost a universal supplement, actually, because even people who eat meat can be low in B12. We have farmed and soiled a lot of nutrients out of our soil now. So I think zinc, very important. Magnesium, lots of people low in that, and that's whether you're a meat eater or not. I would say make sure you're getting those micronutrients and supplement if you've got any deficiencies. So there are a few things that you need to be aware of, and I think it's very important to be well researched if you're going to be particularly vegan, if you're really going to restrict down that much. But you can do it in a very healthy way, and actually you'll we know that cancer rates are significantly reduced in vegans and vegetarians. We know that most vegans and vegetarians have lower BMIs, which is very, very good. Not being overweight is massively important because, let's face it, fat is inflammatory. It takes you into a pro-inflammatory state. Being obese, for example, is the second biggest risk factor now for cancer after smoking. So, it's got a lot of health benefits.
So how do we connect human health and planetary health? Because a lot of what you just said there relates to the planet, and obviously the fruit and veg that we grow, and even the meat that we consume from the animals, they are, reliant on the planet. So there is a link, I suppose, between what the planet's doing, global warming, kind of looking after what's going on, around us, as well as what we eat. So what is the link there? What is the things that we can do to help that?
Great question. Well, I address this a lot in my first book, Superfoods to Super Health, because that book was all about trying to find a healthy diet for humans and a diet for all of us, given that there's soon going to be 10 billion people on the planet. By 2050, it's thought there's going to be 10 billion of us, up from 7.9 currently. Now, if we have 10 billion people on the planet, the question of which diet that we're all eating becomes fiercely important. This matters. There are so many of us now. So plant-centered diets are evidentially the most planet healthy diets. There's been lots and lots of research. What we're not saying is that everyone has to be vegan. What we're saying is that if everyone could reduce the amount of meat and fish they consume, we can make some big strides in terms of planetary long-term survival, global warming, and also making sure that all of those people in countries that aren't as fortunate as in the Western world, developing countries, get their fair share, because we do have enough resources to feed the whole planet. But what we don't have is enough for everybody to eat meat. So, something has to give. If we all make small changes, we can massively impact on what's being done at the planetary level, and that has to take international coordination as well. What happens in so many cases is that we have so much grain and then we feed it all to the animals that then feed a very few people some slices of beef. And that's hugely wasteful. So we need to look at what's going on in the world. We need to adjust our diets and raise awareness, really, about that. I mean, we've totally overfished the oceans. We really have. Like right now, we shouldn't be eating fish because the oceans aren't going to survive. We are so wasteful. There's so much overcatch that's kind of, these are the fish that have died just as kind of indirectly because of the fishing trade that's just wasted, so at the moment our seas need to rest. What people need to understand is that our land, soil, earth, it's all connected. There is no way of ignoring the massive issue of planetary survival. We are seconds from midnight, and what we do now and the choices we make as individuals becomes a collective is really, really profoundly important. It's never been more important to make change.
It's scary when you give us those numbers, the 10 billion, sorry, people by 10 billion people by 2050, and that will roll around quicker than we know. It's how do we make those changes in small amounts now, because they will compound over time. And I think as we've mentioned, we can eat better foods, we can make better choices, but what do you think is the main thing that needs to change in everyone's lives for that to become something that we can sustain ongoing and create for the future?
Well, I think we all have to make choices every day that are governed by sustainability. So it's not just dietary, because that is important and that is a massive one, but we have things like fast fashion, big problem. You know, we're so disposable in our society. If something breaks or doesn't work, you know, clothing, we don't sew it back up again, we just ditch it. You know, electronics, we've got a huge disposable electronics. You know, the new iPhone's out, the next one's, you know, the old one's gone. You know, we're kind of a really disposable consumer society, particularly in the West. And I think we have to adjust those behaviors and realize that this constant consumption is not going to serve our grandchildren, who are going to inherit this planet in a very difficult state, in any beneficial way. So I think, you know, vegetable patches, plant-centered is great. I'm not saying you have to go vegan and you eat no meat. That's not what we're saying, but small adjustments like meat-free Mondays, you know, if we just reduced it from 7 days a week to twice a week, even that would help. Some people will want to go all the way, and that's great too. Reducing our consumption of fashion, you know, that's a big one. Fast fashion is a massive polluter. Letting the oceans rest, letting the oceans breathe. We rely on the oceans for our entire ecosystem. If it goes into dysfunction, we are in trouble. You know, looking at ways to reduce energy, looking at cars, travel, transport. I mean, COVID has taught us that we don't need to fly around the world to do all these meetings, right? So people used to just, plenty of people would get on a plane and commute to places like New York from London for work, but so much now can be done virtually. We're very lucky. We have the technology to allow these changes. And I think the mindset has shifted now, right? So it's acceptable that we do meetings like this. And, you know, the planetary gains will be massive.
With the sort of diet and exercise question, I've always wondered this, because people will tell you, no, it's all about your diet. No, it's all about your exercise. No, it's a mixture of the two. You know, what is your opinion on it? Like, what should people be focusing on more if they are going to make the small changes? Which do you think is more important?
They're both really important, to be honest. Very, very important. So diet, as we've already discussed, each meal that you make, each bite that you take, think of it as like determining your future longevity. Exercise, really important, because actually we have engineered exercise out of our daily existence. So 100 years ago, people used to get 5 times the amount of exercise that we do in the UK and the USA. It was just blended into normal life. People walked a lot. They toiled the earth, you know, they looked after the soil. They walked up mountains. People walked more and did a lot more physical labor. A typical office worker now will be 13 hours sedentary, and then if you add your 8 hours of being asleep, it works out at about 20 to 21 hours of sedentary out of 24. That is a massive, massive problem. I mean, I always look at the children, and kids just run around and play, and they expend energy all day long. Their default is wanting to play and be active. If you then look at adults' behavior, it's totally different. We call play having to exercise. You know, we have to schedule it into our diary because it's so important. I mean, put it this way, if exercise could be prescribed, every single person would be on it. That is how profound the health benefits are. It reduces inflammation, and inflammation is one of the drivers of so much of chronic Western disease and pathology. It reduces your cortisol and your stress levels. Exercise is therapy. It's good for your cardiovascular system. It releases endorphins and feel-good factors. It releases lots of healthy kind of chemical communicators in your body. It's hugely important. So actually, I think although you can improve your diet, it's not going far enough. You've got to be diet and exercise. That is the kind of the magic, the magic bullet, so to speak, to longevity and living a good life. It's both, and it's stress, and it's sleep, and it's all the other things, unfortunately, as well.
And it also comes back to what we were saying before about consistency, that, it's not like, oh, I have to now go and run half a marathon because to keep my exercise up. It's just moving more. And yes. I had a previous guest on the show, Connor, who talked about his company, the Plant-Based Games, and he's started this movement of people that kind of really into CrossFit and kind of all into that sort of training, but we're all plant-based. And he's on a mission to just help people eat less meat and move more. And that's all it really is. It's just moving more. And what you mentioned there before, I live in London. So for me, I walk everywhere because I don't have a car. It's pointless having a car. And in the summer, I cycle most places. But I know friends who live in the suburbs of London who drive to the supermarket and then walk whatever it is, half a mile around the supermarket, and then get back in their car and drive home and then sit there for the rest of the day. And they think that that's their outing for the day. They think that that's their exercise. Yeah. And that's just wrong.
Well, humans were made to move, and that's the problem. And the thing is, a kind of inertia sets in that tricks your brain to think, I'm not sure I was meant to move that much, and you kind of sink into, it's that toxic kind of mudslide again. If you kind of trick yourself into thinking, well, exercise is an effort and I'll just sit here. And I mean, my definition of a couch potato, and I say this in my book, is someone who doesn't exercise 5 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes. That's a couch potato, not just somebody who's really, really ultra lazy, who barely moves. We have to understand the importance of exercise and how it relates to human health. And it's massive. We have a lot of problems with lower back pain. And a lot of people signed off work because of lower back pain. And, it taps into your gut health, your brain health, your immune health, everything. Think of it as, just the best investment in your health. And yes, it takes effort. It really does, especially if you've got yourself into a very sedentary place.
I find this so interesting because I've had multiple chats with multiple people over the years about kind of all these different angles that you can look at health and diet and exercise and, all this stuff. And actually, all it comes back down to is just simply eating the right foods in the right moderation and doing a moderate amount of exercise to keep yourself in a movement state. But yet it's so difficult for people to keep up that consistency. Do you think that there's an element of the social media side of things and maybe just media in general that play a part in why people aren't consistent with that simple message?
Well, social media has a lot to answer for itself because, if some of us added up the hours we spend on it scrolling, they could be hours that we were out exercising. And, scrolling on social media versus investing in your health long term, I mean, I know which one I would choose. We have to be really accountable for how we choose to invest our time, because time is the only currency we have. It is precious. I do think that social media can be a power for good. We can put healthy, inspiring messages out there. But so many of us lose hours and hours of time accidentally. They just slip away of our lives because we are on social media and things like that. And so much of social media, I think, in many ways, so many of my patients say, well, it makes me feel like a failure, or I'm always comparing. And, I think comparison is the thief of joy. You have to set yourself your own goals, your own health goals, your own personal goals, and try not to always be looking over your shoulder at what other people are doing, because social media is the worst for that, right? You will always feel lesser than this person or that person, and that's rubbish. That's no way to live. So I think it's about adjusting your mindset. Dip in and out of social media by all means, but don't let it rule you. And I think we have a real problem with our youth of today and how much they are involved in social media, and mental health and anxiety in young people is a worry, because there is so much that they're always comparing themselves to. So I mean, it does worry me. We'll soon see that generation grow up with probably some very different ideas of what success is. If I ask my kids what they want to be in the future, they will sometimes say a YouTuber. And I think, but that is the generation. Things are evolving differently. As long as we put things in social media to positive use, I use my social media to spread health messages, and I know you use your social media to motivate and inspire, and that's contagious, and that's what I like, and I think that's powerful, is when we can get people who are setting really good examples but not making people feel bad about it along the way.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head there. I love what you said there about taking when people compare themselves to others, they are stealing, or they're losing their joy. They're stealing that joy away from themselves. I think that's brilliant, because it's so true. Like, I see people get into negative feedback loops all the time when, especially, and I'm talking about sort of my world here in coaching, I have people message me and say, oh, so like, I've seen this person do this on Instagram and I'm going to copy it, but it hasn't worked in the way that I thought it would. And I said, well, of course not, because it's not you. You're not that person. That's worked for them. They've got X amount of more experience or different lifestyle or different angle to you. So if you compare yourself to that person, of course you're going to be disappointed. You've got to act the way that works for you. On this, I just wanted to ask your opinion on, what is your thoughts on keto diets? It's a huge topic that's kind of flying around social media at the moment, especially around sort of in women, because there are a lot of people who are not trained as nutritionists, not even trained as personal trainers, not even clued up on anything health-wise, and yet they're selling these keto packages and supplements that apparently help you lose 10 pounds in 10 days. And it's basically marketing to people who are looking for that quick fix. What's your opinion on keto diets?
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, there will always be fads, diets, food propaganda. A lot of it rests on trying to create a little bit of confusion, because if you're confused, then you buy into it even more. Keto is interesting. I think the thing with keto is we don't have a lot of long-term studies about what happens to people if they're on keto long term. We know short term that people can achieve weight loss and things like that. But actually, again, it comes down to social media. People who aren't trained nutritionists, dietitians, etc., probably shouldn't be even involved in selling keto diets, packages, supplements. This is dangerous, and this is in a way commercializing the fact that weight loss sells. We all know that weight loss is a big problem. So many of us find it very, very difficult to lose weight, and therefore, if you tap into that vulnerability with people, you're likely to sell quite a lot of, whether it's your diet book or your keto package or whatever. Keto has got some interesting success stories. So keto was used years ago when trying to help with epilepsy, quite successfully actually. And I think there is quite a lot of research going on in terms of keto and oncology. So cancer is a very interesting one. If you're born after 1960, you've got a 1 in 2 chance of getting cancer. I mean, that's just the stats now. It's going to overtake heart disease as the leading cause of death in the Western world soon. We don't know quite when. Heart disease, I believe, is still the leading cause of death. I think there's about 18 million people that die every year of heart disease, probably about 9 to 10 million of cancer. So we all need to learn to live lives that are anti-cancer, because cancer is something that, if I get diagnosed with a lump, a mass, a tumor, or something tangible and seen on a scan, it likely started 5 to 25 years ago. So, and a lot of the big research, despite billions invested in cancer, we are finding that because it's got such biblical complexity, it's so elusive. It's over 200 different diseases that we get from, this uncontrolled rapid growth of cells. That one way that's really interesting now in terms of trying to target and understand cancer and treat it and reduce it is, why don't we look at how cancer metabolizes? Let's look at what's different about cancer cells. Why do they get this uncontrolled growth? Now, we know that high sugar diets are not great for cancer at all. It's too simple to say that sugar feeds cancer growth, but there's definitely a link, and cancer patients should be on a low sugar diet, definitely low ultra processed foods, plant-centered, great. I tell all of my patients who've got cancer to get a nutritionist and a dietitian that's used to oncology patients. I think it's really important. But trying to understand how these cancer cell metabolizes, that's where keto might be interesting. There is some research going on looking at, does a keto diet, is it going to have any impact on cancer cells? And I think that might be an area of definite future interest for the keto diet. I personally don't practice it. I eat, like I told you, plant-centered. I do a lot of intermittent fasting. I have a window where I eat. I try not to eat before 11 or 12 in the day, and I won't eat after 6 o'clock if I can possibly help it. So that's a kind of structured way of fasting. Every couple of months I do something called Prolon. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a really good 5-day plant-based fast. It was designed by Professor Walter Longo he's an American professor, and he is amazingly well researched in anti-aging and longevity medicine. So doing these kinds of plant-based fasts can really help reset at the cellular level. It is to reduce cancer risk, it's to reduce disease risk, reduce inflammation. So it's a 5-day fast. It's calorie restricted. So we know that reducing your calories is very important for longevity. So there's a lot of new research coming out showing that we all just overeat. We're overnourished in the Western world and undernourished in the developing world. And this overnourishment is really not serving us in any beneficial way. So pulling back and eating about 75% of our calories is thought to lead to cellular reset, to be really good for regeneration of our cells and, reducing inflammation and pathology. So I do that. But yeah, again, we've got to be really careful of these quick fixes, because to be honest, you and I know there is no quick fix. It's a lifetime of good food choices, diet, exercise, reducing stress, quality sleep. It's all of these things that actually matter in the very, very long term.
With the keto stuff, it's like having a square peg in a round hole. As you said, if you're somebody who is got a certain disease or a certain ailment or something that you maybe need keto to help you with becoming a healthier human, then that's what you could be prescribed by a doctor or a nutritionist, but not by some dolly bird on Instagram who basically has become famous because she's an influencer and then just decided to get on the keto bandwagon. That in itself is just wrong. And I think there's a lot of people on Instagram that need to answer for that. But what's really interesting about the calorie deficit thing you were talking about, I have, as I said, gone through quite a few of these kind of different diets and different fads. And I train really hard. And when I started training for my Ironman a couple of years ago, I found that I was trying to do intermittent fasting as well as train for an Ironman, and it was just impossible because my fitness levels were suffering. My fatigue was coming in really, really quick. And what I found was actually I just needed to find the right foods for me to give me what energy I needed. So I started upping things like oats and sweet potatoes and obviously rices and pastas. And I was having way more vegetables kind of earlier in the day. So, even for breakfast, sometimes I'd have kind of what I had left over from dinner the night before if I knew I was doing a big training session, and just experimenting with different things. One of the guys I train with, he's full plant-based and loves it. And he's an absolute animal on the bike. He's super fast. And what he does is he blends sweet potato, cabbage, anything that he can get that is sort of nutrient rich, blends it down. It's almost like baby food, and then puts them into these little sachet packets of, I think, 150 or 200 grams. And then he has like 5 or 6 of them on him when he's cycling, and he'll measure himself via his sort of HRV and his sort of, his heart rate and stuff. And when it drops below a certain level, he'll just have one of these things and test whether it actually gives him the boost of energy he needs to move forward and to continue with his cycling. And I mean, that's going super scientific, but it just proves that you don't need a magic pill. You just need to eat the right foods for what you're doing and your lifestyle to be able to be healthy and move forward.
Yeah. And I think the kind of take home message really is there are many different healthy ways to eat. the modern Western or the standard American diet is not the healthy way. So it's just about, making few adjustments. You've got to find a diet that works for you. And I hate the word diet in a way, because it's kind of, it doesn't really describe it. It's about finding a relationship with food that, is enjoyable, that nourishes you, that fortifies your body. It's your fuel, right? It's got so many functions. It can prevent cancer. It can reduce inflammation in your body. It's so connected to everything that's going to map out in our future, that it's just finding foods that you enjoy, that you can learn to cook. I had to take myself back in the kitchen and relearn some cooking skills, because I didn't have a lot of great skills after I left university, to make the kind of foods that I wanted to be eating myself and giving my family. So I worked with a plant-based chef on the book, but I also got Charlotte to teach me some great tricks, because I'm not a chef and I'm not a cook. But you know what? Vegetables, when they're cooked well, they're amazing.
Absolutely.
They really are.
I agree. And it sometimes comes down to just seasoning. Simple
Yes.
seasoning can really just transform a dish.
Totally.
And again, what we were saying before, laziness is a big part of it. I think that a lot of people just think, right, I want to have this food because I know what it tastes like and I've had it a million times before, so I'm going to just cook this. But actually, you can substitute a lot of very normal standard foods. Like I love cooking a chili. Right, but the chili hasn't got any meat in it. It's full of
Yeah.
beans and
Yeah.
pulses and lentils and that sort of, and arguably has probably more protein per pound than maybe the beef that I would have had in it when I was eating meat. And I think that's also a common misconception, is that a lot of people don't realize that some fruits and vegetables have more protein than some meats. And it's just that education side of it again. And I know that I follow a few people on Instagram who do the comparison, like they sort of hold up a peanut butter on toast versus like a similar sort of weight in steak, and go, actually, they're about the same in terms of protein. And it's things like that. You're like, really? What?
Yeah.
But actually, when you dive into the science, it is. So if someone listening to this is sort of really intrigued by, okay, I need to up my game, I need to make myself sort of a lot more aware of what I'm eating and how I'm eating, where are the resources that you would suggest someone could go and have a look to sort of get them on the right path?
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote a book. So my book, Superfoods to Super Health, is sold on Amazon. For me, it's kind of like, it touches on everything. I talk about cancer, heart disease, blood pressure, stroke. I talk about the environment. I try to just take really exciting bits of science and evidence. It's a motivational book as well as being a health book. I'm trying to give people a wake-up call, and we all need it sometimes, right? It's just that wake-up call of, oh my gosh, right, I'm going to change, and that will have a ripple effect throughout my life, all my family and friends. When one person changes, a lot of people do as well. You kind of say to someone, right, I'm doing this and please support me. And then slowly people go, oh, well, that sounds really good. I could probably make those changes too. And I'd like to actually be healthier and fitter, and I'll come on that walk with you. I think lockdown has been really good because people have been walking lots, and, people have been making an effort because they had time. So what that tells us is we have to make time, because if you don't make time for health, you have to make time for illness later. It's that simple.
I love that. So I'll link your book in the show notes below so people can find it very easily. If anyone else wants to find out more about you and your work, and if they want to get in touch, where can they find you, Jo?
Well, probably the easiest place is Instagram. So I'm at Dr. Johanna Ward, Johanna, Johanna. I try and put my health message across on Instagram and Facebook. But there's lots of amazing resources out there. There really are. I think grab a couple of cookbooks. I think Deliciously Ella's a really good place to start. She's got loads of amazing plant-based recipes if you want to start being more plant-based. The Food Bible is another great one. That they've got a great cookbook. So a couple of great cookbooks. There's loads of great apps as well. I think any of those things will certainly help. And then part of it is just staying motivated, stay committed to the cause. Give yourselves 3 months to make changes, because that's how long it takes to get into the habit and for your body to feel better. And then once you're in 3 months, I'm sure you'll be kind of feeling better and healthier and looking forward to a more vital and healthy future.
Amazing. I am super excited about making my lunch now because I'm motivated to get all the nutrients and greens in there.
It
Jo, this
becomes
is
fun.
absolutely, yeah, it becomes an experiment. See how much you can make
Different
with
colours you can get in.
exactly, yeah, make it like a picture.
Yeah.
Jo, this has been amazing. I've really appreciated your time and all your knowledge. I get fascinated every time I speak to you. You've always got so much to share, and yeah, I really appreciate your time. I really wish you best of luck with your book. You must let me know when it's out so we can get back on and we can have a little chat more about that. But in the meantime, thanks everyone for listening and look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye everyone.